and I started to talk about these communication styles. And when I finished, a man in the back stood up and yelled, "Where the hell were you 5 years ago? I'd still be married."
I would say there's a lot of overvaluing of looks in our culture.
If you're falling in love now, just run.
Run, just run.
We learned in part one of this dating special that the practice of dating has changed over time, right? But ultimately, our desire to find love still exists. So, on part two of this dating special, we're going to share some do's and don'ts. And we're going to pick up at that phase of dating where it kind of becomes a relationship. Now we found someone special.
Right. You went from dating to dating.
Dating to dating.
Right. You went
I
from
like
dating to, okay, I'm dating.
And one thing I think we should talk about is this concept of intentional dating.
Mhm.
And this came up during our interview with Holly.
Right.
And I think that there's sweep me off my feet, love at first sight love.
Mhm.
And then there are some people who are more, again, intentional about
Right.
finding love.
Mhm.
Do you think that it's better to be more intentional or even transactional?
Well, I mean, I don't know if I'd use transactional. That sort of sounds like making it rain, right?
All right.
So,
I guess in the
so,
past it was
so,
almost transactional
yeah.
though. If you
Right?
look at
Well, I mean, everything's a transaction. I mean,
right.
so let's just I got where you're coming from. It just sounds like I don't know. It just seems like a horrible word to use with dating. But yes, should it be more intentional? Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think you do need that spark at first, right? You need that beginning like piece. But then it does at some point it does need to be intentional. But there are people that date with intention is what we were talking
Mhm.
about from the onset, right?
Mhm.
They have certain goals or whatever it is, or certain things they know work for them and don't work for them. And they're looking for someone who has those traits. Like they're intentionally searching for that individual.
Do you think it takes the love out of it? Now, Dr. Holly was very adamant about how intentional dating is good, right?
Mhm.
She is definitely a fan of intentional
Right.
dating. I personally don't agree. I think that unless that's really your goal
Mhm.
and you just want to find, let's say, a husband or a partner in life,
Well,
and that's your goal, that's
mhm.
that's different.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. I guess maybe I fall somewhere in the middle. And here's why I'll say that because I do believe you need that passion for that person, like that pure, you know what I mean, energy that sort of comes out of like when you meet someone and you really connect. But then it does need to become intentional. Like, does it really work? Because you see, I mean, look how many relationships there are. It's like up and down because the people are so passionate. They have these strong feelings for each other, but they can't get along as two human beings. They may be so different in their way that they approach life that it's just never going to work. And usually those things do at some point fall apart or they wind up having this 30-year marriage that just doesn't, it's just not, no one's happy. So I think at a certain point, it does need to become intentional. Like, does this really work? Or, go back to even your words, like transactional, right? Is this really going to work long term for the two people?
So let's see what Dr. Holly says about intentional dating.
Well, I think there's this hope that we're just going to like run into our ideal partner on the street. And some people are blessed in that way and they find their partner, just doing their life and all of that. Um, and they just keep hoping and hoping every year that, someday they're just going to run into their ideal partner in their living room or, out and about. And, sometimes that happens and oftentimes it doesn't. And, I feel like we are so intentional about the rest of our lives, right? Like our career, finances, our physique, hiring a personal trainer. But not many people are accustomed to investing in themselves, especially in this area, which is, our love life, the quality of our relationships. Is really the biggest determinant of the quality of our lives. And yet, so few people invest in themselves in this area that is actually going to make you the happiest that you've ever been.
All right. So, one way or another, whether you were intentional or you just happened to meet someone,
Mhm,
you find your person or you think you found your person, right?
mhm.
Let's be, you think you found your person, right? We like them. We like spending time with them in a serious way. A lot of times things go wrong anyway. I'm sorry, maybe I'm negative, but most of the time things go wrong anyway.
Let's be honest. Don't things go wrong in every relationship? Even friends, like things go wrong here and there. It could be who picks up the bill too many times, or you know what I mean, at the restaurant or whatever. But I think that's part of relationships.
Yes, I agree. I agree. I am curious, and this is one of the things that we asked. What is kind of the ultimate thing that goes wrong? Look, there's a slew of them, right? So you can come up with anything. You said picking up the bill too
Right.
much, right? I mean, anything can go wrong. So
Mhm.
I was curious to see what exactly is like what are the top things that go wrong? Where does it kind of go awry?
A lot of people aren't that intentional and aren't that clear about who will make a really great partner for them. That's one of the biggest mistakes that I see. A lot of people haven't done their inner work before looking to partner with someone else. And so then we aren't truly ready to manifest our ideal partner when we're not ready yet. I would say there's a lot of overvaluing of looks in our culture and a lot of undervaluing of character. I think Hollywood has kind of done us a disservice in terms of, a lot of clients come to me and it's all about looks and attraction. And it's not to say that that isn't important, it's part of the equation. But what else is important, right? We need attraction, we need chemistry, but we also need a lot of other things to be happy and for the relationship to be sustainable.
So, do you think we overvalue? We put too much emphasis, right, on the way people look.
I do.
Because I think that's a big part of it, but I also think, like, people, like, they're not really looking at themselves also to, like, evaluate, right? Like like, they're expecting, and I'll use this, guys, they expect these beautiful women, but then you look at them and maybe they're sloppy, you know what I mean? Or they're not the best looking guy, right? My point is not that, attractive people need to mate with attractive people and unattractive people need to mate with unattractive people, but we put such a high emphasis on other people's looks and what we're looking at, and we're not a lot of times even looking at ourselves.
Okay, but let me back up there for a second. I
Mhm.
just thought of something. You make you say, okay, attractive people looking for attractive people,
Well, no, that's not
unattractive.
what I said. I said I'm not saying they have to,
Right, right. But think about this. Aren't you just, you may think someone is super attractive and I don't,
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely,
So, I mean, technically, I hate to be so cliche, but beauty really is in the eye of the beholder. I mean,
100%.
so just because we deem that person unattractive doesn't mean that someone else, I mean, we were talking about this yesterday, right? Some people like they kind of like we think they're both unattractive, but they seem to think they're like the best thing since sliced bread. So I don't
Right.
know, like
Well,
it's just
but
what
then I guess
works.
but then why do we say society puts too much value on looks if it's based on the individual's preference, right? Society is not putting too much value on looks. Isn't it the individuals that are putting too much value? Because whether it's in society or in magazines or whatever, they're actually letting that penetrate their thought process,
Mhm.
like this is what's attractive.
Right.
Because here's the thing. I mean, look, and I think that's Dr. Holly's point. We
Mhm.
we don't look past like people we get along with really well. And there's some people you just jive with better, that you meet in your life than you will other people. And sometimes it doesn't, and like I said, you could almost relate these things to even just friendship or whatever the case is. It's not always about love, but it's that same, piece, right? It's that same piece. Honestly, anyone that's really going like, don't get me wrong. Do you need to be attracted to the person for whatever reason? Yes. But if you're just putting emphasis on their looks completely, then you're sort of the one that has the problem. Is right.
Well, I mean, let's talk about that for a second because the only way, even if you're, let's say, online dating, right?
Mhm.
Your first impression of that person before even reading their profile is going to be the way they look. And that applies even if we
Look
use the
look at Tinder.
example.
Look at Tinder. You're just swiping. You're not
Right.
even reading. Most people aren't even reading anything.
Right. But even if you use that example that we used in part 1 where you said where I was at the rodeo, remember? I was at the rodeo and I see a cowboy, right? That's the first it's no different, right? You
Right.
see someone in person, you see someone online.
Mhm.
this is going to be your first impression. If that is not your type, and we're going to talk about type in just a second,
Right.
if that's not your type, you may not even get far enough to see
If
if
they're a
you
good fit.
like
Yeah.
that person's personality. So I think it's going to depend on whether or not you have a connection with that person before looking at them in any sort of romantic way.
Okay, so let's separate
Right.
attraction, like physical
Right.
attraction, versus like I guess emotional attraction, we could
Right.
call it, right? So physical attraction, you may go, oh, that person's whatever. They're built the way I like another human being when I'm sexually attracted to, right? That's different than saying I'm attracted to someone because I've spent time with them,
Right.
and and that's where if
And
you're
some
only
people grow
looking.
on you.
Yeah, and if you're only looking literally for, like, someone you're sexually attracted to, obviously, I mean, don't get me wrong, those could work out, but, it just slims the odd. But here's my question too, right? If you go to yourself, "I'm gonna be devoid of whatever, just looking whatever, someone I'm attracted to physically from the onset, or maybe, like, they made me laugh and that's what attracts them to me," right? If I'm just going like, "Okay, how many people do I come across every single day that may be a possible good fit if I'm just
Right.
looking for intentional dating," right? You can't like basically go have a conversation with everyone you pass on the street to go, hey, maybe they'd be a good mate, like
You
you
gotta
just
narrow it down somewhere,
right, you
right?
gotta narrow it down. And I think that's part of what happens with us as human beings, right? You're attracted to certain things, or someone's like, and I'm not even talking about like physically, like you'd be attracted because someone's funny, someone's really
Mhm.
funny and that makes you attracted to them, or someone's really smart. You have to sort of at least get that initial interest, is I guess what we're saying.
Mhm.
And that's,
Mhm.
I think, what we were saying earlier. You got to have that initial interest, whether it's physically or not, to even go, do I even want to go further with this?
I want to talk about type for a second. I think it's a really good transition into talking about type because, when we talk about looking for your type and narrowing it down, right?
Mhm.
And so I don't see anything wrong with looking for someone that you think fits the mold, right,
Mhm.
of what you envision as your type. I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all.
No, absolutely not. Think about it. If you're a physically active person,
Mhm.
you're probably going to want someone who's also physically active.
Mhm.
Like you want to do things together, you want to go hiking, so they're going to be, chances are they're going to be much more physically fit, and if you see someone who's not physically fit, you may not just be attracted to them because you're not going to be able to do stuff with them and spend time with them the way you would who's someone that's physically fit.
Type you could even talk about religion or whatever,
Yes.
whatever it might be, right?
Yes.
So
Mhm.
maybe you're looking for a Catholic male who's dark, tall, and handsome, right? I don't know. Maybe that's your
Well, you
thing.
just
I
went to
don't know.
physical. You went from Catholic to physical in
Right.
one
He's
sentence.
Catholic, but he's also got physical traits and he also makes a lot of money, right? Like this is
Oh,
your
well,
type.
yeah,
Let's just
well,
say
yeah.
that this is your
Okay,
type.
so you're looking for a sugar daddy who just happens to be the same religion as you, is where you're going.
Maybe that's part of what you look for, like someone
Mhm.
like your type is someone who shares common religious beliefs or something like that. I don't know. But
Right.
here's the thing. We think that it's so like, okay, I personally believe it's great to look for your type, right?
Mhm.
Dr. Holly actually thinks that we should go against our type.
Well, I mean, here's the thing, and she does have a point because, right, if you're looking for this ideal, is that ideal really even, like I'm just going to go with what you said. You want someone who's Catholic, you want someone who's tall, dark, handsome, has lots of money, drives a Ferrari, whatever, right? Owns 47 houses, has a vacation home in the Bahamas, whatever, right? You just put all these criteria on that, right? And now you're going, okay, now I got to fill that criteria. And of course you're
Yeah.
going to be disappointed, right? Because yeah, how many people are going to fall into that bucket, while you're eliminating the guy that's maybe, I don't know, maybe he's tall and blonde, like you've already eliminated like the,
And he
the
only
thing.
drives the Tesla. I mean,
Right, right, exactly. So you get so I think that's where my point is, and I know we're teasing about this stuff, but I think
Mhm.
that's really what Dr. Holly's pointing at. Like, don't, build it into such an ideal human being that it makes it really hard to find
Mhm.
based on every criteria.
Let's look at what she says though, because she makes another good point about looking at our past, right? And looking at our history and seeing how far did that type get us in the past. So let's take a look at that.
And I'm a big fan of going against type because usually that hasn't worked. By the time they come to work with me, um, the type hasn't worked out for them. So really being mindful and taking inventory of our past. There can be a gold mine in there because part of every relationship in the past, all of our relationships, there's things that worked and there's things that didn't work, which is why they lasted, but they didn't last forever. And so, really using that to inform your future in terms of who a really great partner would be for you is a really smart way to go.
All right. So while we're talking about types, why don't we also talk about that cliche, opposites attract,
Mhm.
right?
Yin
I
and
don't
yang.
know. I mean, maybe. What do you think?
I I think they can. I think it's just as to me, it's probably as equal as people who are similar attracting. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Because I don't know if really opposites attract. I mean, we could take any example we just used, like someone who likes being outside all the time,
Hmm.
right? If they start dating someone who's more of a homebody or couch potato,
Hmm.
right? Those are opposites. Can that work? Yeah, maybe but those people would probably have to both value alone time,
Right.
right? So think about it. Like if they both have those traits and they valued alone time, that would be great because one would be outside, one would be inside, and they'd have their own separate time. But
Hmm.
here's the thing. If one valued alone, like one was outside, one was inside, and one of those people didn't value alone time
Hmm.
and they wanted to spend time and say that was the couch potato person, right? Now this person's always out, like, and they're opposites. I don't know,
Right.
would that work?
Right.
I don't maybe, but you get my point. Like, so I don't necessarily know. I think it's just more than opposites, right? I guess, and you could say there's multiple opposites, right? So it's not like just two sides of a coin. It's probably like, like a whatever, like a 20-sided dice or something crazy. You know what I'm
Well,
saying?
I
Like
think
there's
let me tell you because here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking of different layers of opposite, right? So you've got
Mhm.
something very surface based, like someone who likes to be inside versus outside, right?
Right.
But then you also have someone who never shuts the hell up, like I don't,
Mhm.
right? Versus someone who doesn't like to talk much, right? And
Mhm.
so you've got differences like that, but then you have those values, and you brought up something there, values, like where your values differ and where they're so opposite, I think is really where you're going to get into trouble. I think everything else is kind of like cool, like you find that other person, oh
Yeah.
wow, they're so quiet and mysterious, or she's so outgoing and that's great, and I'm so
Right.
in love with this opposite. But when you get to values, I think
Well,
that's where it becomes a
If
problem.
if they if they're really firm on their values, right?
Mhm.
Because we see this all the time, like two peoples of different religions marry, right? And maybe, even though they value their religion, it's not really that important. Maybe their children are raised in their
Right.
religion or they're
Right.
so they don't so even though they have values for their own religion and they still practice their own religion, they may not they for them, they may not care if their spouse is Buddhist and their children are going to be Buddhist or whatever. Do you know what I mean? Or
Hmm.
whatever, pick, any group of religions, but they don't care, so I
Right.
think it really depends on how strong that value is. But if both of them, like if you had someone who was Christian and you had
Hmm.
someone who was Jewish, right, and they both very believe strongly in their faith, and they may not get along if,
Right.
to decide who raises what the kids are raised as,
Right.
that may become an issue. But I feel like most people today actually decide that before they go and have kids or even get married, right? I mean, it seems like something you would discuss, like how are you going to raise these children before you would get married? I don't
Mhm.
know.
Well, let's see what Dr. Holly says. She's got something to say about that too.
We often hear that opposites attract, right? But they attract, but they typically don't last for very long. Or if they do, it takes a lot of work to maintain that relationship because of all the differences. Those who we tend to get along with the best are more similar to us. So, when I mentioned like attracts like, ensuring that your values are aligned is really, really important because our values tend not to change over time. And we tend to make our decisions based on our values. So, a lifelong partnership, if that's what you're seeking, is going to be far easier to navigate with someone who values what you do.
Brian,
Mhm.
what is it that we should actually be looking for in a partner, right? Now that we've made it past a few
You're asking
things,
the wrong person.
I know, I know. Uh,
To me, actually, for me, it's someone you could actually really get along with and that understands you even when you're not the best you and understands you when you're the best you, right? So because we all go through these ups and downs, and to me, and it's a balance, right? It's the same in the other direction also, but it's someone that really understands you at like a deeper level And to me, that's what I've learned over my time in dating and, relationships, that it needs to be someone who could really understand you when you're even on the bad side of you and on the good side of you. What about you?
What I would be looking for in a partner for me personally changes over
Mhm.
time, right? I mean
Absolutely.
that's the truth, right? So that
Mhm.
changes and it evolves and we talk about doing the work and but ultimately you just have to have someone who's willing to kind of buckle in and go on that ride, right?
Mhm.
Wherever it goes, because you're going to change and evolve over time. And as long as, even if you're evolving differently and at different paces, like as long as everybody's willing to kind of buckle in, um, because there's like a core love and connection there
Mhm.
and go with it wherever it goes. That to me is super important. But
Mhm.
but before we even get there, things are just getting serious, right? How do you even know if you know this person well enough to know if this is the person for you? And that is
Right.
the question that I know you were super excited to talk about. So,
A lot of people can fake it in the beginning. So the trajectory of the relationship is really important, and the pacing is really important. Um, Certainly, not everybody's going to fake it, but it's really important to actually pace dating, especially in the beginning. So I think, um, a year or two is about how long most people can fake it for a few weeks, a few months, 6 months. Things start to kind of come out if someone's being inauthentic or dishonest. I think one of the scariest things in the world, at least to me, is marrying someone that you don't know and committing to someone that you don't know. And it's not to say that you know every last part of them, but you should know enough after a year or two to know whether this is someone that you want to spend your life with.
Hey, telltale signs you should run. Run.
run.
No matter what, it doesn't even matter. Even if you like the person and you get along, run. Just run. Run now. Run. Something will go wrong, according to Nicholas last piece. Run.
Something is going wrong. All right, but what are those red flags that you should probably look out for early on? I mean, we're going to hear from Dr. Holly again, but what do you consider some of the red flags? I think
You
I've got one.
okay.
All right. If someone is way too controlling up front,
Yeah.
the chances are they're probably not getting any better. I mean,
Well, I mean, here's the thing. If you see any sign of whatever, controlling, anger, like whatever, they don't even know you yet when you're dating, right? If you're
mhm,
only dating like 3 months, like, I have this theory, you don't even really start to know someone until you've known them about 3 months because things just don't come out, right? So,
mhm,
if you're seeing signs of stuff, yeah, they're probably like that, I mean, don't get me wrong,
mhm,
there are extreme situations and sometimes stuff happens, but most likely, I'd say like 99.9% of the time, they're probably like that. Yeah. Controlling
mhm.
is a huge one.
Yeah, that's a big one for me. You have any others?
I think it's I always think it's interesting, like if you're dating online and people do not look like what they look like in their photos, like they're so doctored up, or you know what I mean. The fact that they're doctoring up their photos, even if they're whatever, right? Like the fact that they're doctoring up their photos means they're not comfortable with themselves.
Mm,
Like think about it, you know. So if they're not comfortable with themselves, you know, they're not going to really be themselves with other people.
mm, that's a good point. Or lying. Like if you catch lying
Oh,
early
yeah.
on, like little lies, right?
Mhm.
I mean, Justin always tells me if you're willing to lie about the little things, you're definitely willing to lie about the big things, right? Like those
Yeah.
that's if you
Mhm.
catch like little lies. I mean, and they might be little, right? Like,
Mhm.
oh, I did my laundry yesterday, in conversation, but you find out they didn't. Like, why are you
Why would
lying?
you lie about your laundry?
Right?
Yeah,
Like, why are you
yeah, yeah.
lying?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think the other thing is one of the things for me is when people, along the lines of lying, when people tell half truths or they
Mm,
don't give all the details, and they're like, well, like they don't think they're lying, but
mhm,
you're almost lying through, by omission, right?
mhm,
Where you're not giving all the details, and when you're not giving all the details, someone can't make up their mind whether something's going to work. Forget about the lying, even. It's like if you're leaving stuff out intentionally.
Mhm.
That's a little harder to, that I guess takes more time. Even lying,
Right,
sometimes it takes time to figure that out.
right. But if you're catching it
Yeah.
early on,
Mhm.
run.
Yeah, run, just run. Run.
All right, so let's see what Dr. Holly says about some of the telltale signs you should run.
I think, lack of boundaries, someone is contacting you all the time, you saying what you want and them not respecting that. Those with character disorders tend to love bomb the people that they're dating. And so they make you feel so loved in the beginning. And then slowly over time, they use that to manipulate you. And so it can be really hard to see yourself.
I thought of another telltale sign, but I'm not gonna say.
Do I want to know?
I was gonna say if you go to their house and there's like psychosis medicine all over.
If you go through their medicine cabinets and you
Go
find
through
all
their medicine cabinet. Wait, who should run from who is probably the question on that one. Yeah. Oh my
all
god.
right,
Oh
so
yeah. If you find someone going through your shit,
all right, so let's say you haven't run, right?
Mhm.
Let's just
Let's
say
say
you
you're sort of
haven't.
slowly strolling away. Joking.
All right,
Uh,
let's say you haven't run, and we can go back to some of what we talked about, earlier. What failure, right? And things
mhm.
go wrong, right? But there are some big things in a relationship. So you didn't run, you're in this relationship. Now it's become a relationship. Maybe you've gotten to know that person. Um, you know, there are some failures that are more common than others. So some reasons at least. Um, so I was surprised by number one at first, but it kind of makes sense when you think about it. Let's listen into number one and then we'll talk about it.
Well, the number one reason marriages fail is money. And we don't often talk about money when we're dating, right? We're often taught not to talk about money. But they say that money is a more intimate topic than sex. So I think weaving in ways to talk about money and finances when you're dating, when the time is right, is important. I think communication is really big. Women are trained to be people pleasers in our culture. We're trained to be polite instead of honest. And then we wonder why our relationships don't work out. Really forging that authentic connection from the beginning by showing up in a different way than they've shown up before, by raising their standards and speaking their truth and really coming into themselves in a really empowered way.
All right, so money, Brian.
Money.
Money's number one. Now you want to know why I was looking for the guy with all that money
Yeah, with
before.
all the money. He had everyone's money. You were looking for one of the top 1 percenters? Is that what you were looking for?
Now you
Um,
know. Okay,
yeah.
so my great grandmother, right?
Mhm.
She had this saying, when money doesn't walk in the door, love flies out the window. And I used to think she was just, being silly. I mean,
Mhm.
her husband was not wealthy. He was a barber and he could barely keep that money. He was
Mhm.
always playing cards. But I thought, wow, she's so shallow. And then I got married and I realized she was onto something there.
Well, look, I mean, money is a stress source,
Hmm.
right? For a lot of relationships, and it's even when you have money, it could be a
Yeah,
stress source. Like, how do you
yeah,
spend that money, or
right.
what do you want to do with that money,
Mhm,
or is one person more frugal than the other person? So money could be a stress source. I mean, just in life, money is a
right.
stress source. So I'm not going to get into like the societal whole thing of like, we're all basically forced into like working because we need money, right? But that's really what happens.
Hmm.
And here's the thing, if I mean, depending on that relationship, there could be one person who spends a lot and one person who doesn't, one person who makes a lot of money and one person who doesn't, so they're all there. And just, I mean, let's be honest, it's expensive to live just now
Hmm.
alone, right?
Hmm.
So there can be many stress points around the topic of money.
Exactly. So I
Especially if
can
they're
see
especially
it.
if they're lying about how much money they got.
That's right. That's true. But then you should have run back when you saw
Then
the
you
red
should
flag,
have it. You should
right?
have it, right.
That's your problem now. But but I mean, I think that money, look, it may be shallow, but unfortunately, like you said, we need money to live, right?
Mhm.
So if you can't it's no different than needing, than arguing over a roof over your head, right? I mean,
Right.
to me,
Mhm.
it's the same, or food
One
on the
equates
table.
one equates to the other, right? So the money equates to the roof, the
Right,
money equates to the food,
right.
the money equates to whatever.
It's not like you're arguing that you have, like, millions of dollars and you want $10,000,000, right? I mean,
Mhm.
I think there's a difference.
Yeah.
If you're not if basic needs aren't met, if you're in debt, right, and you have all that stress, that's when finances become
Mhm.
crazy, or someone wants to, do, like you said, do crazy things with their money, but you can't even,
Mhm.
pay for the shit you got,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
gets complicated. Or simply buying a house is expensive, and like, where do we cut corners, and where do we, it just, everything gets to be too much. And if, let's say, you're in a position where both people maybe lost jobs and now you're stressing
Mhm.
over that, and there's just so many aspects to finances.
Mhm. Yeah. Absolutely, and
But
you could
what
see
about other things though? So money, yes, but what else? I mean, what are some other reasons that relationships fail?
I mean, I think one of the other big ones is communication. I think there are people that completely speak different languages than other people, and I'm not talking about, whatever. Both people speak English, but what they're saying, what they're communicating, and what the other person is perceiving and understanding are two completely different things, even if they're speaking the same language. And that could even be, cultural by region, right? You could both be American, and there are certain things like, like, I mean, I grew up in the South, right? You grew up in the North. There are certain things and certain ways people act in those two places where
Mhm,
that could break down communication, or, if some people just have more of an aggressive style of talking, or they seem, maybe their language does seem angrier, but someone comes from a quieter background, right?
mhm.
And they're not really angry. Maybe they're just animated, right? And, so how we communicate could be a huge, huge piece that breaks in a relationship.
Also, I love those people who say, like, they never argue, right?
Yeah.
Because, like, that's not healthy either. That's just,
Do
you're
you think
not
that's even real? I
communicating,
think they're delusional. Like, who never
or they're
argues?
not communicating. Think about it. If you're not arguing, it means that you're never hashing out any of your differences.
Well, I mean, here's the thing, like, how could you never argue, right? Even if you had 2 people pleasers, right? Like, 2 people that were willing to please the other person 100%. Eventually, like, there would be something you'd argue about even in that pleasing
Mhm.
process, you know what I'm saying? So, like, for anyone that says they don't argue with anyone in their life, you know what I mean? Like, even your closest friends you've had arguments with or disagree. Maybe they're not arguments, but you may have a different point of view, right?
Right,
You
and
may
just because you're arguing doesn't mean you're screaming and being,
right.
like, you can be angry and,
Mhm.
communicate that, and that can still be an argument. Like, we're not getting anywhere right now. This is an argument. We're having one. Let's just, table this, walk away, and come back. Or that's still an argument.
Yeah, yeah. Mhm,
I'm sorry. That's still an argument. So if you're not arguing, you're not
mhm.
communicating. That's
Yeah,
my opinion.
and then I mean, the only way you probably do get a couple that doesn't argue is probably if one is such an alpha and one is like a zeta, not even like a beta, like, like a zeta, like, they're so, like, "Oh, no," everything, and the other person is just
I
like,
think they
boom,
call
boom,
that like
boom, boom.
abusive relationships,
Yeah,
Brian. I don't
well,
know.
probably, I mean, I'm not even saying abusive, like, one just accepts whatever the other one chooses, right?
Pretty sure that's
No, well, I don't know if it's abusive, but, like, I mean, maybe it is, but, and that's the only way I could see, like, never arguing, like, someone is making all the decisions, making all the choices, and the other person is just going along with it regardless of whether they agree or disagree, they don't
Mhm,
really care, they're just along for the ride, right?
mhm.
And that's the only way you'd probably get some sort of relationship that never argues. I can't see how else you would do it, you know?
Yeah, communication is big, and
And
that's
eventually, if you
like,
were the alpha, wouldn't you get mad that the zeta was, like, not even ever talking back? I mean, you get my point. Like, eventually, like, something would give. I would think. I don't know.
again, I'm pretty sure that's abusive. I don't know,
Yeah,
like,
yeah. I don't know. I don't know. People are
but
crazy.
I mean,
People
communication
are
is like,
insane.
it's also not, you can't hold everything in, right? And I
Mhm,
think we see a lot of that, like, either someone is overly um communicative, or which can really be critical, right? Or someone holds everything in. And then
Mhm.
eventually you're going to blow. I mean, and so I can see a lot of relationships fail because people are just going about their business, doing things their way, and no one's ever forcing the other one to kind of get it out there. You can't hold that in. Eventually that comes out in one way or the other.
Mhm.
And you can't be an overly critical psycho like me. So you got to, kind of find a balance.
Yeah, you can't be an overly critical psycho. Yeah.
That's my advice to all. Don't be an overly
Oh,
critical psycho.
at least on what's today, Tuesday? At least on Tuesdays, right? You know? So
So yeah, I think that's another big one. Trust is another big one. Obviously, if you don't trust that person, I don't know what you're doing. Um,
yeah, as soon as I see that, that is a big run indicator. Like for me, like if someone doesn't trust you or where you are, then like, where are you? Whatever. I'm with my friends. If they
mhm.
don't like believe that, like, you know what I'm saying? Unless there's reason, but you get my point. Like
And
if
if
they
there's reason, even still, I don't know what you're doing. Like, I
right,
don't know.
right. Like if someone doesn't trust you to whatever, like what you're saying, that's scary. Or they're being like it's like the Inquisition, like, where are you? What'd you do? Like that's
Crazy
like crazy
psycho
to me.
status.
That's like
The whole
great.
new realm of
Ooh,
crazy psycho.
yeah, that's like crazy to me. Like when people don't trust other people, like unless you have real reason, and there are reasons not to trust people.
Mhm.
There's a lot of people out there you shouldn't trust, right? But reason first, not just don't trust people.
Yeah.
Like especially someone you care about.
Mm.
That's crazy.
I think that goes back to doing the inner work on yourself. Like if you don't trust somebody off the bat, A, you
Ah,
shouldn't
that's
be
your own
there. And
issue. Yeah.
B, you should be doing some work on yourself because clearly you have some issues that are unresolved that,
Mhm.
from whatever happened to you in life.
So, what do you think most people don't trust other people about?
I
You
think
think it's
most
like cheating or like money or
Yeah, I don't think it's I don't know if it's money. I think if we're talking blank slate,
Mhm.
like if the person's never done anything to make you not trust them yet. I think it's going to be because you are insecure with yourself and you
Right.
don't think you deserve to be treated um, a certain way. So you're assuming that there's, obviously some foul play going on because you don't believe that you're worthy of someone actually being faithful and dedicated to you. That's my opinion.
Yeah, that's why I say don't trust anyone who like, photoshops up their images. Like seriously, like they're insecure. There's something insecure about them if they can't see themselves as they are.
All right. So speaking of communication, which we were just talking about,
Mhm.
we spoke with a body language expert who gave us a little bit of insight into male and female communication styles. So, I personally think that men and women communicate totally different. I do. I know I hate to bucket that, but I really do.
There's male female communication styles, and when I gave this at a uh, Actors Guild presentation, there were 500 people in the room, and I started to talk about these communication styles. And when I finished, a man in the back stood up and yelled, "Where the hell were you 5 years ago? I'd still be married." And so the difference is, and when a female is talking, when a woman is talking, a man will sit there and just like, mm-hmm, okay, and just kind of absorb what's being said because he's trying to really concentrate on it. And when a man is speaking with a woman, she will go, "Oh, uh-huh," and she'll acknowledge. Now, a man hears that, sees that, and assumes that she's agreeing with him. And a woman sees a man staring at her and thinks he's not paying attention because he's not agreeing with her. In reality, her shaking her head is acknowledging that I've received that information and I hear you. And his staring at her is his desperate attempt to take in all of her body language and her voice to understand how much trouble am I really in.
What do you think?
I think probably for the like anything, you can't put everyone in one bucket, right? You can't say all women have the same communication style or all men have the same communication style. But I think in general, you could say there are totally different styles for men and women. I mean, women most of the time are a lot more empathetic and they listen better than men do, where men are just like, like, well, at least I am like a monkey with ADD, half the time with what's going on. So
So, or when you're listening to a problem, are you trying to solve it? And
Yes.
I will speak from experience because I'm your friend and I know the answer to this already. So, are you trying to solve it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No matter who presents the problem, like, it doesn't matter. Like, even if it's someone I don't know, I'm like, "Oh, yeah, there's an answer for that," or here's but, like, I feel like that's one of my gifts, right? Like, someone could present something, and I'm really good at seeing answers, in it. So,
So, I think a lot of women don't want the answer. I know that sounds little silly, but
yeah,
I don't think I want an answer. And I do get an answer, from my
for
husband.
me.
I don't want it. I
For
don't
me.
want your stupid answer. Like, take your answer and shove it. I
But
don't
then
want
don't
it.
ask the question.
I just want you to listen. That's it.
Okay, so but here's my question then. Do you just want him to listen, or are you asking him in the phrase of a question? See, because here's the thing, if you right? If you and this is anyone, men, women, if you come to
Mhm.
me and you say, "I have this problem and I don't know what the solution is, and here's what the problem is." Right? What do you think I should do? Obviously, I'm gonna say this is what I think you should do,
Right.
right?
If
So if
I
it comes in the
ask
phrase
that
of a
question.
question, if it's like, "I'm having a bad day. This sucks. It sucks. It sucks. It sucks. Life sucks," because we all have those days,
Right.
right? Then you're just listening. But if you start presenting a problem in that, "It sucked because of this," you start well, not that, but you start sometimes leading into question, not just you, just people in general, right? Men and women.
Mhm.
It starts leaning into a question. If it leads into a question, someone is going to give you an answer or at least inject their opinion on what you should do,
Right.
right?
Right. And
So,
sometimes everyone's answer sucks. I don't want to
yeah,
hear the
absolutely.
answer. Just let me go. And that's what I hate because sometimes people's answers, right?
Mm,
And I'm not going to name any names here, Justin, but sometimes people's answers are just so simple like just go to sleep tonight. Just sleep
mm.
on it. Like, I don't want to fucking sleep on it. I want to keep bitching about it because that's what
Right. Because
makes
you're
me
angry.
feel
Because you're angry at
better.
that point. Yeah. And
Right?
there's nothing wrong with that.
Or
But see,
like, why do you care what that person thinks? Well, because I do. I just want to keep going right now. Like right now, just let me, and
yeah.
eventually maybe I'll get to a solution and maybe I already know the answer.
Yeah. I mean, what's interesting about me, and you've probably heard me say this to you, like, just tell me you're venting, like when you start, and I'll just sit there and listen. Like, it's okay because sometimes, and this is every person, men, women, it doesn't matter. Sometimes you just need a vent. You just need to drop the F bomb 50 times in a row because you're just so at that level and you just need a vent and you just need to get it off your chest or whatever the
Mhm.
case is. And you just need someone to listen. It's not even about opinion, or you just need whatever, someone to go, "Oh, it's gonna be okay." Right?
Yeah.
Whatever it is, right? Just really simple. It doesn't matter. But I always feel like, to me, if someone wants that, like I say, I'm not psychic, right? I can't tell what you're something, right? I can't tell. I understand the best I
Mm.
can, and I'm me, so I'm gonna try to help you because that's how I am as a person, right? But if you don't want me to help you, that's cool too. But just always preface with I'm venting, right? Or I just need to get this off my chest or whatever. So that way, okay, I'm not gonna. And then if at the end, when you've gotten it all out of your system and you say, "Hey, Brian, what should I do?" or "What's your opinion on this?" Then yeah, I'll give you my opinion. But if you start off with just I'm venting, so it's communicating before you communicate. Does that make sense? Like it's almost communicating what you want from the situation before you start communicating whatever you got to get off your chest.
All right. So when we look back at this entire process,
Mhm.
from working on ourselves to the dating process to finally finding a partner after, throwing up all those red flags and communication and trust and all this stuff, it seems like a daunting process. Why do we even do this to ourselves? But I guess my question is it really that much work or are we just kind of making it that much work?
I think one of the myths that I want to debunk is that relationships are a lot of work. When we choose better and we're mindful and intentional about who our partner should be, it's so much easier to manifest. It's like going to the airport and saying I really need a vacation, and the agent looking at you and saying, "Great, when do you want to go? And where do you want to go?" And you have no idea, or you have part of an idea, but they can't actually book you a ticket until you define the date and the destination. And so love is very much the same way. The universe doesn't deliver that which we're not clear on.
I mean, the reality is they're really not that much work when you find the right person, right? That's what she's trying to say there.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, and I think relationships are like this, right? They're up and down. It's just how life works with that, and this is every relationship, friends, family, your significant other, and there are times where you are going to have to put more work in than other times, but you're right. If you've found the right person and you've gone through all these parts of due diligence to make sure they're the right person for you, it should be less work than a relationship that is bad for you.
Or at least there's such a foundation that regardless of all that, right, financial trouble, you're not communicating recently, maybe you're
Yep.
going through something and you're feeling a little insecure because everybody has moments where they're going to feel insecure in life. I mean, these are feelings, they're natural. Whatever it is, like if you've like found the right person, then like it doesn't matter what you go through, you'll kind of go through it together, and sometimes it'll really suck, right? Like you use
Mhm.
that thing,
Yeah.
but, like, you always know that you're gonna come out of it.
And I think really what it comes down to is how well do you understand the other person?
Mm,
Because if you understand that whatever, maybe they are a little insecure for whatever reason, maybe it has nothing to do with you. Maybe, as a child, something happened or whatever, right? If you understand that, you sort of go, okay, I'm not going to make that big of a deal because they're a little insecure today, or they're feeling like they're not feeling attractive, or whatever the case is, and how do you fix that? How do you help them fix that for themselves? Right. And I
mhm.
think understanding that and wanting the best for them is really an important part, at the end of the day.
Alright, so that is, our take on the next phase of relationships, and, we had some experts weigh in on whether or not, relationships are hard to work, what to look for, how communication differs, but ultimately, you've gotta know yourself, right? You gotta know your partner, like Brian said, and, you figure it out. That's my advice, figure it out.
And if not, run, 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 run,
If you're falling in love now, just run.
run, just run. Even if you just go to run to think about what you're doing before you do it, go run and I don't know, go run.